Welcome to today's episode of Confessions of a Cleaning Business Owner. Today we're going to be talking training, and more specifically, why should we train staff and what does it actually cost to train a domestic cleaner? So we've got quite a lot coming up on this. We've got a massive training course about to be released. But I'm going to start with the costs of training a domestic cleaner. So how long does it take you to train someone up to speed?
So our basic training is 2 weeks.
Okay, so ours is 4 days. And it took me a long time to get it down to 4 days. It was really tough. But I'm guessing you went through quite a lot of evolution to get it down to 2 weeks.
Yeah, I probably, when I started, it would be a couple of months working alongside me was their training, and it wasn't as focused and it wasn't as systemized. But yeah, 2 weeks is probably the first week is the most intense, and the second week is kind of building on that.
And when you were doing 2 months, what happened after that?
In theory, they were ready to go off on their own, but the reality was they were often unprepared for all scenarios because that 2 months they'd spent working alongside me rather than necessarily being directly trained by me, if that makes sense.
Okay, so what did you expect from them at the end of the 2 months to let them go?
So I expected them to be able to handle most scenarios and to be able to clean any house. And to be fair, even back then, I did have a system in terms of how we cleaned, but it wasn't as simplified and something that we use now as the basic structure. It wasn't as structured.
So I'm going to stop picking on you here for a second, because what most people do is they clean alongside for a month or 2 months, let's say, and they might have a vague expectation. So like you said, well, you expect them to deal with any situation, handle anything. Did you ever assess them as to whether they could handle that? Did you have clear guidelines as to what you expect them to achieve? And did you test that they could actually do it and find out where their gaps in knowledge were and kind of plug them? No, that didn't happen.
No, definitely not. It was very much, I think probably like most of us when we first started, it was very much based on my feeling and my, did I think they were ready and did they think they were ready? And yeah, there wasn't a formal check of actually what were they ready for? What had they been trained on? And yeah, how prepared were they in reality?
And what happened next? I'm not going to ask you because I know what the answers are. But let's say what happens next is they're fine for a couple of months and then quality starts to drop and we've got no idea why it's going wrong, do we, really?
No. And it's always that thought of, well, it must be them to start with. Not that I would think that now, but at the time it would be, it's them. They're a problem. Why are their standards slipped? They obviously don't care. And in reality, that's not the truth, is it?
And in that 2 months that you were working with them, I bet they cost you quite a bit because at least the first couple of weeks, they're not up to speed and, you might have been better on your own.
Yeah, they cost you quite a bit in your time more than anything else, don't they? And then also your energy because you then have to keep the standards up. So you have to work a little bit harder and a little bit faster to make sure the standards don't drop, to take account of the fact they're not up to speed yet.
And let's talk about the other thing that happens. So they go through 2 months training with you, all's great. You get on together like a house on fire. Then they leave you for a couple of months. Things go a bit downhill and then they leave.
Yeah.
All that effort is now down the drain and they left because of something completely unrelated to work. And it's not because you're a bad manager. And these are the excuses I hear again and again and again. And if this sounds like you and you're listening to this, it's not really to point out what's wrong with you. There is another way of doing this. And it feels like every other industry has clocked onto this. But for some reason, in the domestic cleaning industry, we haven't realised that people actually need training. And the cost of not training is exactly what we've just outlined. One, they cost you all the way along. You are spending 2 months training. I did the same, Diane. It's not just you. You're achieving less in 2 months than my trainer can achieve in 4 days. That's the reality. After 4 days, we then know exactly where that person's up to. They're assessed against set expectations. And if they don't meet them, then it's only going to take a little bit, an extra day, to plug that hole of the bit that they haven't grasped. Or they don't work out. That could be the outcome of training.
Yeah. And also, do you think it's probably one of the fundamental issues in our industry is that everybody thinks anybody can do it?
Yes, it's just common sense.
Yeah.
I hate that. And that's not the reality at all. It's not just common sense. And it annoys me sometimes when particularly people running businesses, they expect a cleaner to clean alongside them for a month or two. And it's actually something we're going to do in our training. You know, you can watch me do a task, and sometimes I've got my back to you, and sometimes I've got my side to you, and you're expected to do something alongside me doing that. How on earth are you going to learn how to do what I can do when you may or may not be watching and we're probably chatting about something else and you're expected to do something else? You would never expect a child to learn maths while doing an English essay with their back to you and like doing 20 other things. It would never happen, would it?
No, absolutely. And getting smart about this training. First of all, there's a lot of myths around people and whether they want to work or not. But if you can nail this training bit, then you very quickly, like you say, you find out where the gaps are and can you plug them. And, you know, there's an element around attitude as well as skills. But you'll find out really quickly instead of 4 months down the line when you spent 2 months sort of training them, 2 months picking up the pieces after them, and then they leave.
And part of the problem with this 2 months of training them, as you said, you were always in control during that 2 months, okay? They never really had to do anything themselves. They're suddenly put into a situation where actually they were never taught, they were never empowered to make the decisions or know the right things to do. So you end up getting either a lot of phone calls from them going, what should I do? What should I do? Or they're not confident in their decision. They feel unsupported, even though you believe you're always there to support them. They feel slightly out of their comfort zone. And actually, a lot of people need that hands-on management unless they are fully empowered. And you, unfortunately, don't know whether that person is fully empowered or not by the end of the 2 months. And then they leave. And the reality is they could have worked with you for years and years and years, but you didn't properly support them at the right points at the beginning and properly empower them, even though you think you did, because you never assessed whether they were empowered or not.
Yeah. And do you think that that is actually one of the problems where it's 2 months? They've got comfortable with always having you there, and all of a sudden you've taken that away. Whereas actually, if you made that training more intense, they're not going to sort of rely on you quite so much. You're actually making them more independent by doing it in a shorter timescale.
Yeah, so I don't think of it as being more intense. So I think if our training was just delivered over 2 months, I think that's ridiculously long, actually. I mean, you know, if you delivered it over maybe 2 weeks, it would be just as good as over a week. To be still training someone after 4 weeks, if they haven't grasped it after 4 weeks, something's really, really wrong. So why are we taking 6, 8 weeks? The only reason you drag it out for that long is if you're not training them properly. So I don't think, okay, 4 weeks, 4 days may be quite intense, but 2 weeks, they absolutely should have it after 2 weeks.
We always say that. We think, you know, ours is if they haven't got it after 2 weeks, apart from maybe some gaps that we need to fill, they might never get it because 2 weeks is long enough for a good training program to work.
So the way we do 4 days intense training. We will give them a test at the end of that. But if they don't pass it, we're not worried. They've then got a further week to practice, because sometimes it does take practice, and they will be assessed at the end of that 2 weeks. If they cannot do the job at the end of that 2 weeks, and they probably will have had assessments along the way. So if they do one test and we find out something's wrong, we'll then go fix that 1 or 2 things. They'll get another assessment. If they still can't grasp it, then something's gone really wrong. What is spending more time with them going to do at this stage?
Yeah. It's the reality, though, that, you know, and you said this at the beginning, is it costs more not to train them, doesn't it? Long term, it's going to cause more problems. So what sort of problems is it going to cause? Apart from that, if we're not training them really at all, it can take forever. But what else is it going to cause in the business?
So basically, you're not going to get consistency in service. So you can't deliver consistent service to your customers. They're not going to be able to do attention to detail because they're still working out how to do the main things, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They're not efficient and productive. The worst thing for me is they're not health and safety compliant. So maybe you taught them, they did an online course on KOSH and you thought that was enough to be health and safety compliant. But actually, they need to do every process that you've taught them properly. And if they don't understand why, if they're just copying you and they don't understand the principles behind it, I guarantee within a couple of weeks, they're going to stop doing it and go, well, this way's easier. And I think if they're just following you and understanding what, and just copying what you do, they're never going to be empowered to make the decision themselves.
Yeah. It's a really important thing there, isn't it? Is about teaching people why you want it done a particular way or why it should be done in a particular way is really important in the training, isn't it?
But the most important thing is a lot of people want to grow or scale their business because they want to make more money or whatever reason they want to grow their business. In fact, that's probably why most of us are in business here, but they want to grow their business. If you train someone, you can replicate success. You'll reduce the onboarding time and they're more likely to stay with you as well. But if you don't train them, you're not giving a consistent service. You're not replicating your success. You haven't got a stable foundation to grow from. And not only that, the cost, because you're still training them 2 months later, and then you're fixing their mistakes and things. But because you're so busy spending 2 months training them, you then spend 2 months training them, then you're losing them, which means you're wasting your time, which means you can't grow your business because you haven't got the free time to actually grow your business and do your marketing and recruit for the next person because you are so busy spending so much time cleaning and training them. So
yeah, in that 2 months, what you've probably done is you've built up a bigger client base so that they can take on some of their own clients, and then they leave and you're left with the client base. And that is definitely a trap that I definitely fell into that in the early days when a couple of team members, one leaves. Oh, now I've got to cover for 3 of us. Yeah, it's really tough, and it definitely feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or the other way around, doesn't it, all the time?
So let's talk about what you can in reality do if you're in this trap. And I get that when you first start and you're taking on your first 5 employees, it's hard. What I would really firmly and strongly suggest is you are only going to get consistent quality and employees are only going to know what they're expected to deliver if you have written your standards, ideally in a manual. So you need to say, my standards are X, Y, and Z. This is exactly what you're expected to do. This is a manual as to how you deliver it. Now, we know that they will never read that, but that's fine, okay, because we're now setting the expectations. But number 2, you then need to train them in it. And 3, you need to develop a quality system that ensures they're actually hitting those consistently. Yeah. So while training my first 5 employees, I probably would have them following me, okay? Because up until you've got a proper system, it is hard. So I would have them with me for 2 weeks. I would expect them to be assessed at the end of that. I would be assessing them after 3 days to go, okay, now you should be able to vacuum efficiently, you should be able to clean a bathroom, and you should be able to clean a kitchen. Because in those 3 things, you can train easily within 3 days. And I'd be assessing those, and I expect them to be up to standard, even if they're just copying me. So one of the things that I think we are lacking is that assessment. So assess them, and then almost get them, by that point, they should be able to almost repeat the manual back to you as to how they do all of this. Now, that assessment might have to come off the job. You might have to meet in a coffee shop, just like you did in the interview, and actually sit down with them and question on some of these things. Or you can do an online test. You can use, Google Forms, Microsoft Forms. Give them a written test. Test whether they know this stuff. And there is nothing wrong with giving them that written assessment. And we did for years and years and years. Actually, I don't know why we've stopped, actually. We should do a written assessment. I want to do a written assessment again. So do that written assessment, check whether they know what they're supposed to know, but then move on to the next stage. So actually, you could spend the next 2 or 3 days on just dusting, and they need to nail dusting, and they need to be up to speed, and they need to know exactly what they're going to move and how they're going to move and how we're going to face different glass or wood or what do you do with a sofa. And I do believe that dusting can be taught in 3 days.
Yeah, and I think this is key here, though, isn't it? Is that you're focusing on a task and putting the training in place and then the assessment to make sure that that's nailed, that they've got that, and then they can move on to the next thing, and that it's building on it, isn't it?
Yeah, and this is what I would do, train task by task. So ours will do, on the first day, they will do only bathrooms. And I've had one person did 14 bathrooms, right?
That's impressive.
So what that might mean is actually you, if you're cleaning alongside them, well, you've got the kitchens and the dusting. So they might be doing bathrooms and vacuuming. And you are going to have to be so organized as to how you plan your time so that their learning is prioritized. So if they're going to clean 2 bathrooms, well, the first one, which you'd expect done in half an hour, they might take 45 minutes. But then you're expecting them to vacuum that. Well, I would clean all of upstairs so they've got that vacuum ready for them. And then they're going to clean the downstairs bathroom. You're doing the dusting downstairs so that they can then vacuum through all of downstairs. And then you're on the kitchen while they've got time to do that because it's all going to overrun. But they are on bathrooms and you have to almost put yourself second. And then in the next house, they're going to overrun on bathrooms again. And you're going to have to go through the process again. And by the 3rd house, we're coming somewhere near up to speed. So what we're at by the end of the first day, I would expect them to be coming close to up to speed just on bathrooms.
Yeah. And that's rather than thinking I'll get them to clean a bit of everything. And then by the end of the week, hopefully they'll be up to speed. It's really focusing on them in learning a skill and then just practicing it until they get it perfect.
And this is the other thing that I would do. So, for example, when we teach mopping, okay, it's teach step by step by step. So the first step, how high should the mop be? Well, it should be between nose and chin height. You extend, so our mops are telescopic. You extend it to be between nose and, how do we add the head? This is how we do it. Now you add the head onto it. Now we extend it. Okay, what are we going to do next? Well, this is how we add the product, whether you're doing mop and bucket. This is how we do the product. Now you do the product. You make up a mop bucket. You show us how to spray. Okay, so now you've got to spray an area. Now let's look at, are we going to spray a small area or are we going to spray a large area? Let's talk about, do we put the spray down or how do we do it? Can we break it down bit by bit? And you can even look at what's the wrong way to do it and why and talk through it. But this isn't going to happen if they're just going to watch you mop. For me, this needs to come out of the customer's house and this needs to be taught in a different environment where there isn't the pressure of the customer watching. There's not the pressure of delivering the clean. This is just a learning environment.
So, okay, so we've got offices, so that's a little bit easier for us. So how would you recommend those first couple of days training? Should they be in a client's house that you've spoken to when they've got extra time, or maybe ask a friend, or in your own house? Well, how would you handle it if you haven't got the office and the ability to do it there?
I think that if, for example, you were going to do, I wouldn't have a problem with you doing your own house. And I get that for a lot of people, they don't feel comfortable and they don't want the cleaners clean their own house, but it takes all the pressure off. You could just do a friend's house, but I would be really clear on day one and say, right, we are only cleaning the bathroom. Take all the pressure off to deliver a whole clean. And I would want it to be in an empty house when no one else is there. There's no distractions. I don't want the customer. So doing this in a customer's house, I've been there, tried training in a customer's house, and you have to feed back to that cleaner and say, no, you're getting this wrong. And they're aware that someone else might hear that. And I don't think that's a very good learning environment. So potentially do it in your own house where there's no one there. But again, I feel uncomfortable training on my own bathroom because I feel a little bit responsible for the dirt. So I don't really like that. So, you know, if it was me, or to be fair, we're lucky we have it in the office. No one's going to disturb us and there's no emotional attachment to the bathroom in the office. So yes, I guess it would have to be your own home or one just dedicated to that. But no expectations, no time expectations. So it's not unrealistic that we could spend an hour just talking through the theory on how to clean a bathroom, and then expect them to clean that bathroom. And it could take a further half an hour because we've done parts of it as we've gone. But then they've got a checklist that they need to check against as well. So then you're now leaving them to do it themselves, to get on with it. And then you're going to check it and you're going to feed back. So you're going to go through them and they go, right, let's check each part of this checklist together. You tell me, so you check it. So let's empower them to check it. Then go, right, do you want to go back and fix number 1, 8 and 17, those points, however many points you've got? It's always about empowering them to fix their own mistakes.
Yeah, that's really, really powerful. One of the things that you can do, so if a client's house is the only option, we always would choose a client's house that we know the client's not going to be in. But also you can have the trainer there while another cleaner is there doing the rest of the house, and they're being paid as normal for that. And then the bathrooms, if that's what you're training on that time, can be done with the trainer and the trainee. And that's not part of the clean. It's just a bonus for the cleaner that's there, that she's getting the bathrooms done for her. So that can work really well because it can encourage the other team members to want to be working with a new person, but also it means that you're not so worried about the actual clean being done because it's already been taken care of by an experienced team member. So that's an option if your only option is to do it in a client's house.
And I remember doing this, and I've trained and done exactly this in a client's house where they've got to do both bathrooms and I'm doing the rest of the house. And you want to stay with them and you want to help them. They don't want you there, but you want to sort of look over their shoulders, but you realize you have to give a bit of space. But then you are getting so stressed out with what you're doing because you're trying to keep one ear on what they're doing. It's just impossible. The stress levels go through the roof trying to train while cleaning. I've got to say, I did hit the point where I said, right, I'll have another person there. What we do now, what do we do now? I don't know what we do now. We have that person's just doing the bathrooms, and then yes, someone else will potentially do the other parts because the trainer has to be concentrated on them doing the bathrooms. Now, I'm not saying the trainer can't dust a couple of bedrooms while we're there, but to do the whole house is totally unrealistic.
But then the other option, of course, if you're currently, your first employee and you've got to train them, then you've got to kind of find a way around that. So the only way around that for me is you just add extra time onto the clients, and that just fully accounts for that then. So if all they're going to be able to do is the bathrooms and you've got to do an element of supervision, you then can't do the rest of the house in the normal time that it would have taken. So you've got to make allowances for that. So is it about planning where you're going to take them and how long you believe you'll need to add to make sure it gets done to the client standard, but also time to train?
So we spend 3 hours on the first day training to do bathrooms and vacuuming. That's all they do a bit of dusting as well. So dusting, vacuuming and bathrooms, and it takes 3 hours. And nothing is really cleaned in that time. That is just training. So that's not in a customer's house. That's just in the office, which doesn't really need cleaning. It's just the process of it. And then they'll go out and they'll do one house. Now, what happens is they are mostly up to speed. They're about 80% up to speed. They don't need to keep asking the trainer. They know what to do. They've got their checklist. And on that first house they do, they feel empowered from that first moment. Now, they'll still have the trainer there. And on day 2, we're going to spend another 2 hours. And I think the thing that goes wrong in the domestic cleaning industry is you look at this and you go, Louise, you are lumping out 3 hours training because I've got to pay the trainee and I've got to pay the trainer. That's 6 hours with 0 income. And then obviously we do go into a house and we make a little bit. We probably cover costs on that one or a bit more. But what it's meaning by dedicating that 6 hours of paying both, it means that our training's done so much faster, because the reality is that if they're taking an extra, it can take double the time to clean. And I think what we're not adding up is if you try and do 2 cleans that day and it's taking double the time, and that's going to go on for a week, it's going to cost you a lot more than my 6 hours.
Yeah. And I think that's the key here, isn't it? Is this investment up front actually saves in the longer term, whether it's the investment on the first day saves the second week, however it is, or worst case scenario, you were spending 2 months sort of training, then actually intensifying it a little bit is definitely going to be the key here. So you're going to be running a workshop on this, aren't you? I know that it's not finalized yet, but can you tell us a little bit about it?
So yes, we're going to do the 4 days training in 2 days with the trainer. So the people that come on this workshop, because it is only 2 days, they already have to be experienced cleaners and you have to have trained a couple of people. And what we're going to do, so I need you to have a bit of training experience. So we're taking those people and we are going to train them to become absolute excellent trainers. So we are going to go through the theory of training. We are going to go through what really needs to be done to get the most out of those people. We are going to structure a training program so that you can get the most out of people, so they are the most supported they can be. And then where a lot of people come unstuck is actually in training the elements. And so what we're going to do is on the course, we break down every element of every aspect of training, and we do exercises on almost all those elements. So by the end, you'll walk away with a manual with all your SOPs, because we're just going to do that, your standard operating procedures. You are going to have a plan on exactly how you're going to train your staff, and you're going to have practical ways of teaching them, because just showing people is not enough. Let's make fun learning activities so they'll remember that lesson. So when you go back to it, you can go, you learned that theory and you can keep applying it, because I don't want to teach them how to mop. I want to empower them to make the right decision on any floor type.
Absolutely. And that's key here. And actually, we get asked so much, don't we? Do you offer anything to train my staff? And we're here to train the business owner. And this is what this is all about, isn't it? It's train the trainer. It's you as a cleaning business owner, whether you've got a team yet or you want to build your team, this is giving you the skills to be able to train that team effectively, isn't it?
And this has taken one heck of a lot of work because it really hasn't really existed in the domestic cleaning industry. So like always, we take our learnings from other industries. We look at the best of the best and we take it and we apply it. But we also, what's really unique and where I think we've come a little bit unstuck in the domestic cleaning industry is that we've got to make it fun. People now go on social media, they want entertaining. We need to make the learning fun. We need to make it engaging, and we need to test that they are actually taking those on board and then can apply it to different situations. So this is a heck of a lot to fit in 2 days, Diane. That's why I need people to come to me with experience, and then we are going to really hone those skills. So, while we will cover the basics, we are going to skip through the basics really quite fast. I need experienced trainers to really get them up to the next level.
How about if somebody has been a solo cleaner, then started the process of team and it's not worked, and at the moment they've gone back to being a solo cleaner, but they do at least have the experience of how not to do it, perhaps. Would they benefit from it?
I think that if you are just starting out growing your team, then I think we would really need to be looking at the next iteration. So we're just rolling it out as a 2-day course at the moment. The next iteration, really, this needs to be a 3 or 4 day course. So I think we would have to be looking at doing a longer course, because if you haven't grown and managed at least 2 or 3 employees over really a good few months, I think we are really looking at, there's so much more you have to bring in terms of onboarding them and in terms of managing them. And I think we'd have to look at developing some of those other skills, particularly if it hasn't worked out for you. What I don't want is people to walk away with all the knowledge that I'm giving and still not be able to apply it. We would then have to do another day of going, let's develop your management skills as well.
Yeah, so really maybe there's a beginner course almost in terms of ready to take on your first employee, and then the trainer is going to kick in. So this particular one is going to be more for somebody who's a bit more experienced. You've got a couple of team members already or more, and you just want to get your training right finally.
Yeah, so if you've got, this is ideally 5 to 10 team members already, you've had them for a good couple of years, you've got an idea what you're doing, actually you really want to nail this, get it right, and this is about scaling your business. So we're really looking at the 5 to 10 team member area, where you get a bit stuck around the 10 team members. This is how we're going to really rocket past that. It's not, how are we going to take on and retain our first few employees? I've not quite got my system finalized. You already need to know what your system is, what you're expecting them to deliver. This isn't, I'm a solo cleaner and I've got a good idea, but I've never written it down. I expect you already to have it written down. Now, I am going to provide standard operating procedures, but you are going to have to take what you've got and go, actually, what of that applies to mine? Let's tweak it a little bit, but you've got to have a really solid idea. And I want you to have made a lot of mistakes as well. I want you to have gone, I tried X, Y, and Z, okay? And we go, all right, let's look at it. Why didn't it work? Let's change it. Actually, here's a activity that would really have changed it for you to go, oh my gosh, because you're not going to understand the power of what we're teaching unless you've learned to do it without it.
Yeah, we all learn with lots of mistakes, don't we, in our businesses? And the key here, and obviously listening to our podcast as well, is learning from our mistakes, isn't it? And the changes that we've made to simplify our businesses, make them more effective and productive, and then share it with you. So brilliant. I'm really looking forward to this one.
I think there's a lot of activities that we do that seem relatively simple, right? And I think if you just came along on this and you go, well, Louise, you're training me really simple stuff, until it's applied in the right way at the right time to the right person. And it's only then that you go, and I think if you didn't, you'd go, this is simple. This is simple. Of course it's simple. It's designed to simplify the training process. We want to make it as simple as possible. And I don't think you'd realize the power of all of this.
No, it's going to be really exciting. And of course, for our industry, this is groundbreaking, but also for us as cleaning business owners who are struggling to build teams, then knowing that there's training out there and different ways of doing it, and that the cost of not doing it are actually higher than doing it in the first place, aren't they? So yeah, good podcast, and I'm looking forward to the workshop.
You can come along with it, Diane, if you want to.
Thank you. I'm gonna be taking notes at the back.
Right, see you soon. Bye bye.